But like, you got to take the good with the bad. Now 1% of your followers can join the stream. Like, you know, I don't either. If 1% of my followers joined the stream, I would be monetized already. I'd already have ads. It would be monumental. And then the more people that are in the stream, it's just gonna push it out to more people. That's just how you grow. But it's like, there's just nothing to it but to do it, bro. There is nothing to it but to do it. The pot, okay, bet. So apparently, DC, I got friends telling their 1K followers they streaming and get more people in their lives. This shit don't make sense. Like, you know what I think it is? I've struggled with consistency in my life, except for this moment. This season of my life was the one time, so I decided to just stick to that. And it's turned into what it is now. But it's transitioning into what I really want to do, which is instead of doing rant videos on Instagram, I want to do this. This is the #1 priority. So, Gotham City, i.e. DC. National Guard, DC. Apparently, some white liberal women are very upset and are saying that despite being literally carjacked and getting her arm broken, she doesn't want the National Guard in Chicago. Those are people where you see what they have to say and then you repeal the 19th Amendment. That's one of those situations. That's one of those hoes mad, literally shot it the fuck up. That's one of those. Why is it so quiet?
To patrol the streets of the city alongside DC police forces. And we're seeing yet another instance of Trump's expanding of the federal government's reach, this time when it comes to control of police in local communities. Will we see pictures like these in other U.S. cities in the future? Well, one of the places President Trump has mentioned as needing help fighting crime is nearby Baltimore. And joining us right now is Maryland's Democratic Governor, Wes Moore. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Wes Moore. This is the face of little kids not being able to read. Children in Baltimore can't read, sir. You have probably one of the lowest educated populations in the country, and you want to call National Guard deployment for your skyrocketed crime rates unconstitutional. How about you eat poop, Baldy?
For having me.
So here in DC, there are guardsmen from 6 different states on the street. The mission is, quote, beautification, duty, and support. The defense secretary has authorized them to carry M4 and M17 rifles, but to date, we have not been able to locate anyone armed within the National Guard on the streets of DC. Why, though, are you so opposed to this deployment?
Well, there's plenty of reasons. One,
go ahead.
It is not.
Go ahead and say something stupid.
You cannot continue this type of pace of operations, particularly when it's costing over $1 million a day in order to do this. The second, it's not scalable. You're not going to be able to do this in every single major American city, particularly when.
You know what else isn't sustainable? Having an entire generation of retards that can't read, having carjackings and homicides every day, having constantly. That's also not sustainable, Baldy. People not being able to afford anything is not sustainable. People not being able to walk outside and not be in fear of their life isn't sustainable. I think I would much rather have my tax dollars go to keeping the National Guard around so that I don't get my car stolen at CVS instead of having a bunch of retards that can't read.
Many of the cities that have the highest
or
crime
people that can't go outside. Many cities that have the highest crime rates like yours
are the places that have actually deployed their National Guards to Washington, D.C. So who's going to go do the work in their cities? The third, it's unconstitutional. It's a direct violation of the 10th Amendment. And if for a party that talks about state rights, it's amazing how they're...
If it was unconstitutional, the president wouldn't be able to do it. But since it quite literally is constitutional, that's why he's doing it. And that's why they're getting deployed to 19 other states. What is this retard even talking about?
In the way they're conducting public safety. The fourth reason is because it's deeply disrespectful to the members of the National Guard. You know, as someone who actually deployed overseas and served my country in combat, to ask these men and women to do a job that they're not trained for is just deeply disrespectful. And so when we're thinking about all of these lasting factors, when we're thinking about the fact that it serves as a
So National Guardsmen are unequipped to deal with what police can't do?
Because it's not that the police are incompetent, it's that the people in control of the police are disarming them and decriminalizing
horrific acts of violence and theft and sexual abuse. It's that they've been castrated. You've castrated your own police with your garbage policy.
Fraction from the fact that the president's disastrous economic policies are making everything more expensive for everyday Americans and making life harder for everyday Americans. There is a multitude.
Giving away all your shit to illegal aliens makes things more expensive for everyday Americans also, by the way.
Of reasons that I am against this, and I will not authorize the Maryland National Guard to be utilized for this.
It's a good thing that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you have to say because you're just a governor and you can't defy the president of the United States.
Well, the National Guard does say that these troops will be trained and deputized by federal marshals. So this is going to be distinct from the military rules of engagement.
But it is counter to every bit of training that we've received. When I joined the military, we joined with a clear intention to fight and win our nation's wars. The members of our National Guard are trained up to be able to address things like emergency situations, situations where you need a surge of supports for traumas and disasters that are happening within individual jurisdictions. That is not this, and this is a direct deflection that the president is authorizing.
We know the president watches the program, and he likely saw the guest listing because he's tweeting about you, or truthing, I guess. He says the governor, Wes Moore of Maryland, has asked in a nasty and provocative tone that I walk the streets of Maryland with him. And he's talking about crime-ridden Baltimore. It's quite lengthy, but he goes after your record on crime. He says it's a bad one. He says if you need help, he will send in the troops, which is being done.
My roommate is from Baltimore. He grew up in D.C. and spent years in Baltimore before moving to my high school in California. Baltimore was a PvP server when he was in elementary and middle school. With the way that these YNs are moving right now, Baltimore is bananas. How does this guy have the gall to pretend like, let me take the president on some propaganda tour as if he can't see the crime rates? What?
I mean, when we saw
in some parts you can't kill
a few
home
weeks
intruders,
ago the
those are
deployment on the
shitholes
streets
about.
of Los Angeles, the governor of California tried to go to the courts, and he was unable to stop it. Is the reality here is you can't stop the president from sending troops to Baltimore if he wants to.
Exactly.
The year before I became the governor, in 2022,
you can't
Baltimore
stop him,
was
Baldy.
averaging almost a homicide a day. And I came in and I said, I refuse to be a governor who just offers thoughts and prayers to this situation. So we said we're actually going to work in partnership with Mayor Scott, work in partnership with local elected officials, work in partnership with local law enforcement. We made the largest investments in local law enforcement in our state's history, over $50 million going to Baltimore City alone.
That came from federal money.
That came from both federal and state money. And also, Maryland became one of the only states that actually helps.
What did he
to fund
just
the
say?
US
Is he
in
bragging
partnership
about
with
taxing people?
With local law enforcement, we made the largest investments in local law enforcement in our state's history, over $50 million going to Baltimore City alone.
That came from federal money.
That came from both federal and state money. And also, Maryland became one of the only states that actually helps to fund the U.S. attorney out of balance sheet, taking many of those gun crimes and actually turning them into federal charges. And the results have been incredibly encouraging.
Then why have you guys been decriminalizing armed robberies? Like, what is this guy talking about? Like, everything out of his mouth, you can be like, actually.
Maryland's had amongst the fastest drops in violent crime of anywhere in the United States in the past 2.5 years. Yeah. The homicide rate in Maryland is down over 20% since in the United States in the past 2.5 years. Yeah. The homicide rate in Maryland is violent crime have been incredibly encouraging, where Maryland's had amongst the fastest drops in violent crime of anywhere in the United States.
We gonna fact check that. Has Maryland had fastest drops in violent crime in the last 2 years? Let's go ahead and verify this theory. Significant declines in violent crime over the last 2 years, but it's not definitively the fastest in the nation. As data varies by source and metric. Statewide violent crime dropped significantly in 2024, with homicides down 32% since 2021. In Baltimore City's homicides falling 41% in the same period, reaching a 50-year low in 2021 and 2024. Baltimore's violent crime rate has decreased for 3 consecutive years, with a 34% drop in non-fatal shootings from 2023 to 2024. Okay, well, that's a CBS logo, so I don't know exactly how accurate that is, but we'll see. Nationally, violent crime in major cities fell by 6% in the first half of 2024 compared to 2023, per the Major Cities Chiefs Association. Maryland's trends are mixed. Baltimore City saw homicides drop from 142 to 90, and aggravated assaults from 3,028 to 2624. That's still a PvP server. That is still absolutely a PvP server. And you can say, okay, we invested more into the police force, so violent crime has dropped. But until you criminalize the offenders, it's not gonna drop that much, brother. It's really not. Until you put the vagrants and the Nevrons, like Asmongold's 2% rule, until you just round up all the bad guys and lock them up. Like, what's the point of having a whole bunch of police officers and you arrest somebody that does violent crime and then they get let out on $400 bail 4 days later?
Last 2.5 years. Yeah. The homicide rate in Maryland is down over 20% since I have been the governor.
That creates a reward
structure. The homicide rate was this low in Baltimore City, I was not born yet. And so the reason that I've asked the president to come and join us is because he seems to enjoy living in this blissful ignorance, these tropes and these 1980 scare tactics. And, you know, just last week I was in Baltimore and I was with a group called We Are Us, who's a violence intervention group. And they say, we're all we got. We're all we need. And that's exactly how people in this community feel. Because while the president is spending his time from the Oval Office making jabs and attacks at us, there are people actually on the ground doing the work who know what supports would actually work to continue to bring down crime, but it's falling on deaf ears of the president of the United States.
You're talking about
I think the struggles and the pain of the people that actually have to deal with the Nevrons in your city, I think their cries for how garbage your town is falls on your deaf ears. And I think you're being very, very ignorant in framing the president as a bad actor, as if it's a good thing the military actually needs to be deployed into an American city. Because people just can't act right. People just can't not beef. It can't be a PvE server. It can't even be a PvPvE. Which, like, by not prioritizing this stuff, all you're doing is disenfranchising the 50 to 70,000 a year earners that live in the inner cities and live in the more lower income areas where all the crime is happening. So you're taking the most vulnerable people and you're not doubling down on the necessity for their safety.
Positive trend line. The president's pointing to the FBI statistics, which shows Baltimore is the 5th most instances of violent crime on a per capita basis, 4th highest murder rate. To your point, the city of Memphis is also on that list, and the governor of Tennessee sent those National Guard troops here to this city, not to the streets of Memphis. But
and we know we have work to do. We know, like, if one person does not feel safe in their neighborhood, that's one too many. But we also know what tactics actually work and what tactics are just theatrics.
But the mayor in Baltimore did just say he wants federal help. He doesn't want National Guard troops per se, though. He says he wants agents from FBI, DEA, and ATF. Do you need more federal help in policing if your mayor thinks?
Watch him lie.
Oh, absolutely. And we need the president to stop cutting funding. Because if you look at the president's budget, it actually cuts funding towards violence intervention groups. It cuts funding towards the bureaus.
Oh my gosh, what a sleazeball. The violence intervention groups are nonprofits that just steal money and lie. How about actually follow federal law? How about stop being... Hold on. Is Baltimore a sanctuary city? Not officially a sanctuary city. Okay. However, it has been labeled a sanctuary jurisdiction by the Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security and Justice Department due to policies perceived to impede federal immigration. Okay. So you don't want to follow the rules, and now you're going to frame your funding getting cut as a result of you not following the rules, and then you're going to use these nonprofits as a Trojan horse to play the victim. You can't make this stuff up, bro. And unfortunately, stupid people watch the news. So stupid people, you know what they're going to do? They're going to watch this guy lie, and they're like, oh my gosh, Trump is cutting funding and he's... No. This dude is just a wolf in sheep's clothing. Baldy over here is just a wolf in sheep's clothing. And people that don't think about the words out of these individuals' mouths, it's like they're allergic to questioning.
of the FBI and the ATF that are supporting local jurisdictions like Baltimore, that it doesn't do anything about things like ghost guns and these extended Glock clips that allow these Glocks to essentially turn into automatic weapons. Those are actually real tangible things that the President of the United States could do, and where you could put capital to actually make our community safer.
So you are a Democrat who is...
If you followed immigration laws, I bet it would be a lot harder
to put a switch on a Glock.
President Trump says so as well, possibly a presidential candidate. He talked about you the other day.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of time talking about you.
I've been on his mind a lot.
You're spending time talking about crime. Is this something that, as a Democrat, you think the Democratic Party needs to be more vocal and muscular about when running for office? Because I hear you doing that. It's a very big change from 2020. When the idea was defund the police.
Absolutely. And yeah, the president's spending all of his time talking about me. I'm spending my time talking about the people I serve. And yes, I believe that we have to be able to address the issue of crime. I came up in and I have existed in neighborhoods and communities that have been chronically neglected. And I remember one of the first things that happened in our first months in, I had to visit shock trauma inside of Baltimore because Baltimore had one of the largest mass shootings in its history. And I visited a young man, a teenager, who was just finished surgery and had one of his testicles shot off and was talking about how was he ever going to become a father. And I said at that point, I refuse to continue doing this and not putting the proper resources in place and not being able to put a real focus on making our community.
So you know what's so bananas to me is how in the world does he come off and say something like this? He's what you're doing is you're literally making Trump's point for him. And Baldy does not realize that. Your city is cooked. It's a PvP server. Something needs to change. So by vocally rejecting the assistance of the National Guard to make your streets safer, how are you going to say that you care about reducing crime and you care about people not being gunshot victims and you care about people not putting a switch on a 223, but then you don't oblige with immigration policy, which we already know is the #1 cause of the smuggling of illegal weapons in America, getting them elsewhere. Do you see how this logically doesn't track, sir? You see how there's a bit of inconsistency here with saying I care about crime, but I don't want any parts of a solution that is going to directly drop crime? DC has gone from literally Gotham City to Poland after like 9 days. So if you really care about dropping crime in Baltimore, this kind of seems like a no-brainer.
Safer. And that's why it is so frustrating when we're hearing from the President of the United States something that is just purely performative, without actually focusing on these communities and these neighborhoods who believe that progress is possible and who are willing to put in the work, and we're just simply asking for Washington to be able to acknowledge it and support it.
Is actually crazy.
He says you're not presidential timber at all. I imagine you disagree with that assessment?
No, I've been very clear. I'm not running for president, but it's interesting but it's interesting. The president seems to be more concerned about my future than he is about the future of the American people. And that's where I'm asking him to keep his focus.
He's worried about the future of your city so that Americans in it stop dying and not being able to live a happy life.
On the things that actually matter right now, which is the fact that his economic policies are driving up prices on everything from electronics to the clothes that we wear to the food that we eat. Talk about the fact that he has immigration policies that are knocking out
We've brought in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and prices for everything are lower than they've been in years for everyday consumer goods. He just said 3 lies in a row.
Tens of thousands of jobs in the state of Maryland. Talk about the fact that you are about to kick veterans and seniors off of health care. Don't worry about my future. Worry about theirs.
I want to ask you, you brought up immigration. One of the residents of your state, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was just released from pretrial detention on Friday. But the Trump administration's instructed him to report to ICE within 72 hours for deportation to Uganda. He's originally from El Salvador. He was mistakenly deported to that prison in El Salvador and then returned to the U.S. This is federal policy. This is not state policy. But I do wonder, is there anything that you are doing to help his family stay united?
And what we know is that, and all we're asking for is that the Constitution be followed on this. The Constitution is very clear about how we deal with these types of issues. And when we look at what's happened in this situation, it's the president manipulating the fact that we have a very broken immigration system inside this country. But instead of...
Yeah, because people don't follow it. That's why. People don't follow the immigration system. That's the problem. It's
actually doing the work that it requires to fix it. Actually working in Congress to come up with a comprehensive immigration bill. The president is working to exploit the brokenness. And I am very clear that there is no higher priority for me than public safety.
You want him to face a day in court, in other words.
Absolutely. I want due process. I just simply want a court and a judge.
Everybody knows this guy is a criminal that beat his wife. You can't advocate for due process and then ignore the due process of him becoming being granted access into our country in the first place. Due process doesn't mean anything in that instance. If he had a visa, if he had a work visa, if he already went through the proper channels, if he had a green card, if that was the situation, that's one thing. I would be like, okay, whatever. I don't know why you care so much about this guy, but sure. But that didn't happen. And he's also a convicted criminal. Bro, this is so exhausting.
What is going to be the future fate?
These people
of
just
this
lie.
Case in all cases like this, and not simply the President of the United States or the Secretary of Homeland Security, who's trying to be judge, juror, prosecutor, and executioner inside this case. I believe in the Constitution, and I believe that that's what we should follow for this case.
I want to ask you about something your party is tinkering with here, redistricting, or gerrymandering, as some people know it. You've said you don't like talking about it, but all options are on the table when it comes to your state. There's only one seat here that is actually Republican, and it's a seat held by Representative Andy Harris. Are you considering trying to redraw lines in Maryland?
Yeah, when I say all options...
Because there shouldn't be, that's why. Because there shouldn't be. If you come to America from El Salvador, and then you break a bunch of laws and you beat up your wife and you bring your family here who also doesn't belong here, and then the governor of a liberal state, it's so crazy that Democrats always advocate so hard in the best interest of everybody except for Americans. In what universe does allowing this convicted criminal who is a proven wife beater, how does that make the lives of Americans better, safer, or more prosperous by prioritizing this guy's due process out of the country when the due process in was ignored? It's the most asinine concept. It's so annoying that this is even a conversation.
Are on the table. All options are on the table.
Are you actively looking at it now?
If your priority is your people, if it's the people of Maryland, ask yourself, how does letting a criminal roam free benefit them? There's no other way to answer that question except for it doesn't.
And I think we have to. Yes, and I think we have to. Because I think what's happened is this is what people hate about politics in the first place, the fact that the President of the United States, very similar to what he did in Georgia, where he called up a series of voter registrants and said, I need you to find me more votes. We're watching the same thing now where he's calling up legislatures around the country and saying, I need you to find me more congressional districts.
He's doing it. That may be different, but Democrats redistrict. You know this.
Yeah.
But Gavin Newsom's doing it right now. A few years ago in New York, we saw this. This can backfire. Do you really want to go down this road?
I want to make sure that we have fair lines and fair seats, where we don't have situations where politicians are choosing voters, but that voters actually have a chance to choose their elected officials. We need to be able to have fair maps. And we also need to make sure that if the President of the United States is putting his finger on the scale to try to manipulate elections because he knows that his policies cannot win in a ballot box, then it behooves each and every one of us to be able to keep all options on the table to ensure that the voters' voices can actually be heard and we can have maps.
You don't think in that one district where they have a Republican representative, that they are actively being represented in Maryland?
I think if you look at maps across the country, less than 10% of congressional seats are actually competitive by nature. Less than 10%. And so if you look at the average win margin in our state and so many states, the average win margin is upwards of 20 to 30%. So that means we already have so many gerrymandered areas that we have to be able to add a measure of fairness in the way that it's applied.
This is what I think. Literally split it 50-50 at first, and then they need to do like like an in-person ID vetted polling of voters in your state to where they survey and you get an accurate reading on the representation in the place that you live, see where your residents lean politically, and then draw the maps based off of that. Because this whole just the governor having the power to retroactively decide what areas get more representation just simply for power, I think this is not a good thing for either side, because it's like it removes the authenticity out of it. It just means that people are just cheating. It's cheating. So they need to just get rid of it completely, or not be like, just be shameless about it. Be like, yeah, we want power, we want control. Of course we want to win. Yeah, of course. Like, stop playing this game of like pretending that you care about the fairness or people really being represented. No, you don't. No, you don't. Shut up. You want your $700,000 freaking salary. That's all that you want. However much it is. However much money this clown makes to make all these stupid decisions. You want your big ass salary, and you want to keep putting people in, you want to keep putting donors in position to keep you in power so you can keep making money. Like, I wish we would just stop this facade.
And so, yes, all options need to be on the table in the state of Maryland.
And you're looking at it, you said.
Yes,
Governor, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you so much.
Unbelievable. What a freaking joke.